She had no choice. Ryan was closing in, his hands clenched with rage, his eyes burning with betrayal. She couldn't outrun him, but she could outsmart him. And that's when she did the unthinkable. She sat on his lap, pretending it was all part of the plan. "Play along," he whispered. "I'll protect you." But who is he really? And why did he step in? What happens next will shock you. Will she trust him? Or is there a darker secret lurking behind those cold eyes? Before we dive deeper, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss a second of the twists to come. And drop a comment below. Where are you watching from? Let's get the conversation going. Mira's heart raced as Ryan's footsteps grew louder, each one a drumbeat of impending danger. He was getting closer. There was nowhere to run. The bar's atmosphere, once lively and carefree, now felt suffocating. Every conversation around her sounded muffled, drowned out by the blood rushing in her ears. Her mind raced for a solution. Her ex, Ryan, had always been unpredictable, volatile. He'd once promised her a life of luxury, only to tear it apart with his jealousy and possessiveness. She had tried to escape him before, but it was always the same. He always found her. She glanced over her shoulder. Ryan was just a few feet away, eyes locked on her, his lips curling into a sneer. She knew if she stayed still, he'd drag her into another violent confrontation, and if she ran, he'd catch her. But then, like an answer to her prayer, she saw him. Adrienne. Seated at the far end of the bar, effortlessly handsome, his presence commanding without needing to try. His eyes flicked up as if sensing her gaze, meeting hers with an unreadable expression. There was a calmness in his stare, something that said he was in control, something Ryan lacked. Her breath hitched. A split second of hesitation passed. Ryan's voice, louder now, booming with anger, cut through the tension. "You think you can hide from me, huh? You think I won't find you?" Without thinking, Mira moved. She walked toward Adrienne. Her legs felt like lead, but she couldn't afford to freeze. She couldn't afford to stay put. As she reached him, she climbed onto the bar stool beside him, then, before she even knew what she was doing, sat on his lap. Adrienne didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. Ryan froze in his tracks, eyes widening in disbelief. Mira felt the heat of his gaze burn into her back, but all she could focus on was the steady pressure of Adrienne's hand on her waist. His quiet voice cutting through the tension. "Play along. I'll protect you." And for a moment, the world outside their bubble faded. Ryan stood there, fists clenched, face reddening with fury. But Adrienne's calm seemed to make him pause, if only for a second. Ryan's voice came out in a low growl, sharp and accusing. "What the hell is this, Mira? You really think you can just hide behind him?" Adrienne didn't respond. He didn't need to. He simply looked at Ryan, his expression unreadable, but there was an undeniable air of authority in the way he carried himself. Mira felt it, felt the shift in the atmosphere as the power dynamics in the room changed, all because of one man's quiet command. Ryan took a step forward, then another, but Mira saw the hesitation in his eyes. Adrienne's presence was like an impenetrable wall, and for the first time in a long while, Mira felt safe. But that feeling was fleeting. Nothing in her life had ever been simple. Ryan wouldn't back down, not without a fight. And Adrienne, who was he really? She turned her head slightly, just enough to catch Adrienne's gaze. His eyes were still calm, but there was something in the way he held her that made her question if she had just crossed a line she couldn't uncross. The silence stretched, thick with the weight of unspoken words. Ryan's fists clenched tighter, but he didn't make another move. And then, without a word, he turned on his heel and stormed out of the bar. Adrienne exhaled slowly, his hand still resting on her waist, his touch grounding and firm. As the door swung shut behind Ryan, he spoke softly, almost to himself. "That was close." Mira's heart was still pounding in her chest, but she couldn't help but feel a strange sense of relief wash over her. The moment had passed, but the uncertainty was far from over. She didn't know why Adrienne had stepped in, why he'd protected her, why he'd said the words he did. But one thing was certain. Nothing would be the same after tonight. Not her life. not her heart. The bar was quiet now, save for the soft hum of voices returning to normal. But for Mira, the world seemed to be moving in slow motion. The adrenaline from her escape still pulsed through her veins. Adrienne's presence was like a calm before a storm, and yet there was a certain unsettling calmness to him. She could still feel the heat of Ryan's anger burning in her chest, but now, a different kind of tension lingered in the air, one that made her question everything about her situation. Adrienne didn't speak immediately after Ryan left. He simply shifted, guiding her to sit beside him. The world outside the bar was out of reach for a moment. No more confrontations, no more threats. Just the strange quiet that came with a man who clearly wasn't bothered by the chaos around him. Mira's breath steadied, but her mind raced. She had just sat on this stranger's lap in front of her ex, who was known for his temper and violent tendencies. And now, she was sitting in his personal space, trying to piece together how her life had come to this moment. She glanced at Adrian, trying to read his face. His eyes were dark, focused on the empty glass in front of him. He had a look of someone who didn't need to explain himself. Someone used to taking charge and expecting to be obeyed without question. "Why did you help me?" Adrian didn't look at her right away. Instead, he took a slow sip of his drink, the glass clicking against his lips in a deliberate motion. His hand was still resting on the back of her chair, too close to be casual but not enough to feel intimate. Mira wasn't sure what to make of him. Was he a hero? Or was there something else at play? After what felt like an eternity, Adrian finally spoke, his voice low and composed. "Because I don't like bullies." It was a simple answer, but it raised more questions than it answered. He didn't know her, didn't owe her anything. And yet, he had stepped in when most people would have stayed out of it. What did he want from her? Mira's mind raced, but she couldn't get the words out. Instead, she stared at the floor, trying to process everything that had happened in the last few minutes. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a random act of kindness. Adrian had been watching her for a reason. "You don't even know me." "I know enough. Your ex has a reputation. I didn't want to see you end up like every other woman who's crossed his path." Mira swallowed hard. The words were harsh but true. Ryan had a history of controlling women, isolating them, and then throwing them away when they no longer served his needs. Mira had been no exception. She had tried to leave him before, but each time he'd dragged her back, using guilt, manipulation, and sometimes physical intimidation. She looked up at Adrian now, searching for any sign of judgment in his eyes. But there was none. Just a quiet understanding, something that made her feel both seen and vulnerable at the same time. "Why did you really protect me?" "Because sometimes, the right thing to do isn't the easiest. And you, Mira, you need someone who'll do the right thing for once." Her heart skipped a beat. His words cut through the fog of confusion that had clouded her thoughts. The weight of the moment sank in, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she didn't feel entirely alone. But there was more to this than just protection. More than just some strange, fleeting act of kindness. Mira didn't know it yet, but her life was about to change in ways she couldn't even begin to understand. Adrian Cole was no ordinary man, and neither was her connection to him. It wasn't just fate that had thrown them together. There were secrets, hidden beneath layers of wealth and power that even he hadn't yet revealed. For now, though, Mira couldn't help but feel a strange sense of gratitude mixed with wariness. The protective wall Adrian had built around her felt safe, but how long could she trust it? The night dragged on, the bar slowly emptying as the clock ticked toward closing time. The tension between them didn't ease. Adrian, calm as ever, kept his distance, but his presence felt like an anchor in the chaotic storm she had just escaped. Mira didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for tonight, she was safe, and maybe that was enough, for now. The night carried on, but the world felt different now. The air in the bar was heavy with unspoken tension, as though Mira and Adrian were the only ones still trapped in the moment. Suspended between what had just happened and what would come next. She didn't know whether to feel grateful or uneasy. Perhaps both. Mira sat in silence, occasionally glancing at Adrian, still unsure of what to make of him. He hadn't pressed for answers, nor had he asked questions. His composure never wavered, his every movement deliberate and careful, like he had all the time in the world. Her phone buzzed on the table. Ryan. Again. Mira instinctively reached for it, but the moment her fingers brushed the screen, Adrian's voice broke through her thoughts. "Don't answer that." The coldness in his tone made her pause, but she didn't question it. Her ex's calls were nothing but demands, threats, and desperate pleas for control. Adrian's voice had more weight than the ringing phone in front of her. Instead, she sat back, looking up at him, finally speaking what had been on her mind since the moment he protected her. "Why did you help me? Really?" Adrian's gaze softened slightly, but there was still something calculating in the way he looked at her. He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing just enough to send a wave of chill down her spine. "Because you're in danger, Mira. And for once, I'm not going to let someone like Ryan ruin another person's life. He's not just after you. He's after everything you've built, everything you could become." His words cut deeper than she expected. Ryan's presence in her life had always felt suffocating, but to hear someone else validate her fear, someone who didn't owe her anything, was unsettling and oddly comforting at the same time. "You don't owe me anything either. Why do this?" Adrian's lips twisted into a tight smile, almost as though he were amused by her question. Then, as if weighing his words carefully, he answered, "Because, in a way, it's personal." That answer hung in the air, the ambiguity leaving a trail of curiosity in its wake. Mira didn't ask him to elaborate, though she felt the unspoken tension between them. She was starting to wonder if she had made a dangerous decision by trusting him. But then again, what choice had she really had? The hours passed, the noise of the bar dimming around them, and Mira found herself lost in Adrian's presence. She knew, deep down, that her life was shifting, that this man, this stranger, was becoming more entwined with her future than she ever expected. But what was his game? Mira tried to shake the feeling of being manipulated, but it was hard when the kindness he showed her felt so genuine. Yet there was something in his eyes that told her he had plans of his own, plans that she was now part of, whether she liked it or not. Finally, Adrian spoke again, breaking the quiet that had settled between them. "I'll help you get out of this mess, Mira, but I need something from you in return." Mira's heart skipped a beat. The sudden shift in his tone told her everything she needed to know. This was no longer just about protecting her from Ryan. There was a cost, a price she would have to pay. But she couldn't back out now, not when she was already in so deep. "What do you want from me?" Adrian's gaze met hers, unwavering, as though he had already anticipated her question. He didn't hesitate. "Adrian, I need you to marry me." The words hung in the air like a sudden storm. Mira's breath caught in her throat, her mind scrambling to catch up with what she had just heard. Marry him? A man she had just met, who had offered her protection in the face of her ex's wrath, was now asking her to become his wife? Her first instinct was to laugh, to call him out for the absurdity of the proposal. But there was something about the way he said it, so calm, so sure, that made her pause. She didn't know why, but she knew he wasn't joking. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she sat in stunned silence, her mind racing with the implications. Marry him? A fake marriage? She was no stranger to bad decisions, but this one felt like a new level of insanity. What? Why? Are you out of your mind? Adrian remained calm, never breaking eye contact. His demeanor was as cool as ever. But there was an undeniable sincerity in his voice when he spoke again. "It's the only way you'll be safe. If you stay close to me, they'll leave you alone. Ryan will back off. People like him, they understand power. And right now, I have the kind of power he fears." "This is crazy. I don't need saving. I just need my life back." But the more she said it, the more the reality of her situation hit her. Ryan wasn't going to just let her go. He never did. And as much as she hated the idea of marrying someone she didn't know, someone who had his own hidden agenda, she had no other options. "Mira, you can walk away from this, but he won't let you. I'm offering you a way out, a way to make him disappear from your life for good." Her heart raced again. But this time, it wasn't just fear. It was a strange mix of desperation and curiosity. Could she really trust him? Was this some kind of deal she was too naive to understand? And if she said yes, what would it cost her? The room felt smaller now, the distance between them non-existent. Everything she had known about her life, her choices, had been upended in a single conversation. And the worst part was, she was starting to think that maybe, just maybe, marrying him was the only way to survive. The silence in the air was almost deafening. Mira sat frozen, her mind racing as she tried to make sense of the words Adrian had just spoken. "Marry me." The phrase echoed in her ears, bouncing between her thoughts like an impossible riddle. Was it a joke? A manipulation? Or was it the only way out of the nightmare she had been living for so long? She glanced at Adrian, still sitting beside her, his gaze unwavering. His offer was no longer just a proposal. It felt like an ultimatum. But he hadn't pressured her. He hadn't demanded anything. The calm assurance in his voice was almost unnerving. It wasn't a matter of if she agreed. It was a matter of when. Mira swallowed hard, pushing aside the panic that clawed at her chest. This wasn't how she imagined her life would go. Her escape was supposed to be simple. Get away from Ryan. Find a way to start over. But now, here she was, trapped in a game she hadn't chosen, with a man she didn't fully understand. "You want me to marry you. But why? I don't even know you. You don't know me. I know enough. I know that Ryan won't stop. I know that you need protection. Real protection. And I know that you're smarter than to keep running. This is the only way to make him disappear for good." The words hit harder than she expected. She had been running from Ryan for months, and he always found her. Always. No matter how far she went, no matter how many times she changed her job or her number, he found a way. But could she really trust this man, this billionaire who seemed to hold all the power in the room? Mira's hands shook as she clasped them together. Adrian was right about one thing. She couldn't keep running. But the idea of marrying him, being forced into some kind of arrangement, a contract she didn't fully understand, it made her stomach turn. What kind of life would she have in a marriage like that? Adrian seemed to sense her hesitation, and after a long pause, he spoke again, softer this time. "Think about it, Mira. This isn't just about me. This is about you taking control of your life. If you stay with Ryan, you'll always be his victim. He'll keep tearing you down, using you until there's nothing left. But with me, you can be free." Mira's heart raced again, but not from fear. There was something in Adrian's words that cut through her doubts, something that made her consider the possibility of a future that didn't involve hiding, constantly looking over her shoulder. The contract. The words seemed so sterile, so detached from everything she was feeling. But it was real. Adrian wasn't offering a simple act of kindness. He was offering a solution. A dangerous, complicated, morally ambiguous solution, but one that could set her free. Mira stared at him, her mind trying to reconcile the situation. This wasn't a fairy tale. There was no romantic gesture, no slow burn attraction. There was only a cold, hard reality, one that forced her to face the truth she'd been avoiding for months. She had nowhere else to go. "What exactly are you offering me?" "I'm offering you safety. I'm offering you protection from Ryan, from the world he's trying to control you with. I'm offering you a way out, a way to step into a new life, without looking over your shoulder every minute of every day. But you'll have to play along. We'll be a married couple, for the public's sake, for his sake. No one can know it's a lie." Her mind whirled. A marriage of convenience. A partnership based on survival. It was a far cry from the love she had dreamed of in her younger years. But was it the only choice she had left? And if I say no? Adrian's face didn't change, but the air around them seemed to shift. The softness of his voice hardened, just slightly. "Then you're on your own, and Ryan will never let you go. He'll hunt you down again and again, until there's nothing left, and you'll never be free. So, you tell me, Mira, is it worth the risk?" The words stung, but they were the truth. There was no hiding from that. Mira had no illusions left. Her options were limited. There was no grand escape, No rescue from some knight in shining armor. There was only this man, Adrian, and his strange, cold offer to save her. To save her from the past she couldn't escape, and the future she was terrified to face alone. Adrian's words hung in the air, heavy with finality. The choice was hers. And yet, it felt like there was no choice at all. She couldn't keep running forever. Maybe this was the way out. The only way out. All right. Adrian's gaze softened, just a fraction, as though he had been expecting her response. He didn't smile, but there was a shift in the air. A change, subtle but palpable. For the first time since they had met, Mira realized that this wasn't just a contract for him. It was a plan, a dangerous, risky plan. And she was now a part of it. Good. We'll make it official tomorrow. But don't get confused. This is a business arrangement, nothing more. You play by the rules and you'll be safe. But step out of line and the deal is off. Understood? Understood. The agreement was made. The contract signed with unspoken words. Mira had no idea what she had just stepped into, but there was no turning back now. As she stood up to leave, Adrian's hand rested lightly on her shoulder. It wasn't possessive. It wasn't demanding. It was a gesture of quiet assurance, a reminder that in the world they were about to enter, trust was a currency she could neither afford to lose nor to waste. And as the door to the bar swung open, Mira stepped out into the cool night air, her thoughts racing, her future uncertain. But for the first time in months, she felt like she was taking control. Whatever the cost, whatever the consequences, she was about to find out just how far Adrian's protection would go, and how far she was willing to go in return. The next few days blurred together, each one feeling like a repetition of the last: meetings, contracts, and the looming presence of Adrienne. The outside world continued to spin as if nothing had changed, but Mira's life had shifted into a strange new orbit. She was no longer just a waitress trying to escape her abusive ex. Now, she was part of a deal she didn't fully understand, caught between a past she couldn't outrun and a future she wasn't sure she wanted. Mira's mind churned with thoughts as she walked down the hallway of Adrienne's penthouse. It was everything she had imagined and more. Luxury in every corner, from the marble floors to the sweeping city views. But none of that impressed her anymore. It wasn't the wealth that had drawn her in. It was the danger, the power that came with it. And with that power came secrets. Secrets that felt like they were just out of reach. She had agreed to the marriage, but something gnawed at her. The more time she spent with Adrienne, the more she realized that there was something he wasn't telling her. Something important. Adrienne had been careful, never revealing too much about himself. He was always composed, always in control, and every interaction with him felt like a carefully calculated move. But there was something about the way he looked at her when she asked too many questions, something that made her feel like she was being watched, analyzed, but never fully trusted. She didn't want to feel like a pawn, but with every passing day, that's exactly how she felt. And now, as she stood outside his office door, something inside her told her she was about to find out why. Enough is enough. It's time to know the truth. She knocked softly before entering, not waiting for an invitation. Adrienne was standing by the window, staring out at the city below, his back to her. She hadn't expected to find him here, not when he had promised her a few days off to settle in. "We need to talk." Adrienne didn't turn around, but his voice came out steady, almost as if he'd known this moment was coming. "I assume you have questions." "Questions? No. I need answers." She stepped forward, closing the door behind her with a quiet click. Adrian didn't move, still looking out the window as if his thoughts were far removed from the conversation at hand. But Mira wasn't going to wait for him to open up. She wasn't going to let him control this any longer. "Who are you really, Adrienne? You're not just some random billionaire offering me protection. You've been hiding something from me. Something big. You owe me the truth." Adrian's shoulders stiffened, but he didn't turn around. Instead, he spoke slowly, as if choosing his words carefully. "What you don't understand, Mira, is that this wasn't a choice for me either. You think I'm doing this out of the kindness of my heart. But it's not that simple. You're tangled up in something much bigger than you realize. Mira's heart skipped a beat. His words sent a shiver down her spine, but she didn't back down. She stepped closer, narrowing the gap between them. There was no more pretending. She was done with the games. What do you mean? What's bigger than me? You've been playing this game with me, and I don't like being kept in the dark. It's not just about you, Mira. It's about Ryan. And it's about the people who have been pulling the strings behind the scenes. People who think they can control everything. Your ex is just a pawn, but he's dangerous. He's more connected than you know. Mira's head spun. She had always known Ryan was involved in something shady. But hearing Adrian speak of him like this, like he was just one part of a much bigger web, felt like a gut punch. Her life, everything she had fought to escape, wasn't just a personal battle anymore. It was a fight against forces far more powerful than she had ever imagined. What are you saying? That I'm just a pawn too? Adrian didn't answer immediately. Instead, he took a deep breath, his expression unreadable. It was the first time she saw a crack in his otherwise controlled demeanor. No. You're not a pawn. You're the key to everything. You're connected to this mess in ways I didn't foresee. You were always part of the plan, Mira. But now, I'm starting to believe you weren't just a part of it. You're the one who can take them down. The words hung in the air, heavy with implications. Mira felt the ground shift beneath her feet. For the first time since she'd met Adrian, she understood something deeper. She wasn't just in danger because of Ryan. She was a part of something far bigger, a tangled conspiracy she had been blind to, until now. Her ex was just the beginning. Adrian's role in all of this was more than just being her protector. He had his own stake in the game, and the truth was more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. Mira's eyes narrowed. She had come here looking for answers, but instead, she had found herself deeper in a web of lies, power struggles, and secrets that would change everything she thought she knew about herself, and the world she was now part of. So, what now? Adrian met her gaze without flinching. Now, we stop running. We take control. Together. But as Mira looked into his eyes, she wasn't sure if she could trust him, or if she even had a choice anymore. The next few days passed in a blur of meetings and high-stakes conversations, none of which made Mira feel any safer. Adrian kept her close, his presence a constant, but the questions swirling in her mind only deepened. She had never wanted to get involved in someone else's world of power and corruption, yet here she was, trapped in the middle of a game she didn't understand. Adrian's cryptic words, "You're the key to everything," echoed in her mind, but she couldn't piece together what they meant. Not yet. She tried to ignore the growing unease, focusing instead on her daily routine, sitting in meetings, attending galas, pretending to be a part of this new world. But every time she saw Adrian, the unease in her chest only deepened. He was hiding something from her. He had to be. She could feel it in the way he looked at her sometimes, as if he was waiting for her to figure out the pieces of the puzzle he had placed in front of her. It was one evening, after yet another lavish dinner with Adrian and his business associates, when Mira found herself sitting alone in his penthouse, staring out over the city that never slept, just like the thoughts that kept her up at night. She wasn't sure how long she had been sitting there when Adrian finally walked in, his face tired but resolute. "It's time you knew everything." The words hit her like a thunderclap. Mira's pulse quickened. For a moment she thought about running as far as she could, away from the danger that was closing in on her. But she didn't move. Something in her wanted to hear it, wanted to understand the depths of the darkness she was now a part of. Adrian walked over to the sleek modern bar in the corner of the room, pouring himself a drink before turning back to her. His movements were deliberate, careful, as if he knew the weight of the moment. Mira didn't speak, just waiting for him to explain. "Ryan isn't just a random ex. He's connected to something much bigger than you or me. He's involved in a criminal enterprise, one that's been in the shadows for years. But the real danger, Mira, is what you don't know about him, what he's hiding." Adrian's eyes locked onto hers, the intensity of his gaze almost unbearable. He was telling her something she wasn't prepared for, something that could shatter everything she had believed about her life, about her past. "What does that have to do with me?" You're connected to Ryan through something much bigger than just a relationship. Your family, your father, Mira. He was involved in this operation years ago. He's the missing piece. Mira's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't seen her father in years, not since he disappeared after a failed business venture. Her heart pounded in her chest as memories of her childhood resurfaced, memories she had buried deep. But this was too much. Her father, involved in something criminal? It didn't make sense. My father? No. You're wrong. He's been gone for years. He had nothing to do with Ryan. Adrienne's expression softened, but there was no pity in his gaze. Just cold, hard truth. Adrienne, I know it's hard to believe, but Ryan was never just after you. He was after your family's involvement in this operation. You were just a pawn in his game, and now he's come for you. But there's more, something worse than you can imagine. Mira felt the world tilt beneath her. Adrienne's words struck her like a hammer, breaking apart the foundation of everything she thought she knew. Her father's disappearance, her ex's obsession with her. Suddenly, they were all part of a much darker puzzle she had never seen coming. Her head spun, her chest tight with the weight of Adrienne's revelations. She tried to steady herself, but the truth kept slipping through her fingers like water. How had she not seen this? How had she missed the signs? Her family was at the center of something so dangerous, and now she was caught in the middle of it. Adrienne stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. You're stronger than you think, but if you want to survive this, you need to trust me. This isn't just about you anymore, Mira. It's about stopping Ryan, stopping the people he works for, and it's about uncovering the truth about your father. Mira opened her mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Her mind was racing, too many questions swirling in her head. Why hadn't he told her this sooner? What else was he hiding? But the one thing she did know, deep down, was that there was no going back now. What do we do now? Now we make sure Ryan never comes near you again, and we take down the people behind him. The decision was made. Mira didn't fully understand the scope of what she was about to get involved in, but she knew this was her only chance. She had walked into a trap of her own making, and now she had no choice but to follow Adrienne, no matter where this dark path would lead. She had no idea just how deep the conspiracy ran, how close to her own life it was. But one thing was clear. The game had changed, and there was no turning back. Mira's life was no longer her own. It was entangled in a web of lies, betrayal, and criminal empires she hadn't even known existed. And as she looked into Adrienne's eyes, she saw something she hadn't noticed before. A glimmer of fear. Even he was playing a dangerous game, and the stakes were higher than either of them could have anticipated. The morning after Adrienne's revelation, Mira could feel the weight of the world pressing down on her chest. The truth had unraveled her sense of reality, leaving her with more questions than answers. She sat by the window of Adrienne's penthouse, staring out at the bustling city below, but her mind was far from the view. Her life was no longer her own. Ryan, her ex, was no longer just a figure of her past. He was a shadow looming over her every move, a threat that wouldn't go away. And now, with Adrienne's promise of protection, the real danger had only just begun. She tried to focus on the present, on Adrienne's words the night before, on his plan to stop Ryan and the people behind him. But there was a nagging feeling in her gut, a sense that something was missing. She couldn't shake the idea that Adrienne wasn't telling her everything. There was always a piece of the puzzle he kept hidden, and as much as she tried to ignore it, her curiosity gnawed at her like a constant ache. She shook her head, standing up and moving to the desk where Adrienne had left a stack of files. He hadn't said anything about her involvement yet, but she knew she wasn't just an innocent bystander in this mess. She was part of it now. She had to understand what she was up against. As she flipped through the papers, her phone buzzed with a text. Her stomach clenched when she saw the name on the screen. Ryan. You can't hide forever, Mira. I'll find you, and when I do, I'll make you regret this. The message was simple, but the implications were anything but. Ryan was getting closer. Mira didn't know how much longer she could stay under Adrienne's protection, or if she even wanted to. But the cold reality was that she had no choice. She wasn't ready to go back to the life she had before. She couldn't. Just as she was about to reply, the door to the penthouse opened with a soft click. Adrian walked in, his presence immediately filling the room. His suit was impeccable, as usual, and there was an air of purpose about him that reminded Mira just how much she didn't understand about the world he inhabited. "You're still awake. Good. I need to talk to you about the next step." Mira looked at him, trying to mask the unease bubbling inside her. She couldn't just sit back anymore. She needed to know what Adrian's plan was and how far he was willing to go to keep her safe. She couldn't be just a pawn in this game. She had to be in control of her own future. "What's the next step? You said you were going to take down Ryan, but how?" Adrian gave her a look that was both reassuring and distant, like a teacher giving instructions to a student who wasn't quite ready for the lesson. "We need to strike at the heart of his operation. I've been gathering information about his ties to the underground network. If we expose him to the right people, he'll lose his power. But there's more. Ryan's reach is far. He's got people working for him, people who will stop at nothing to protect his empire." Mira swallowed hard. This was real now. She wasn't just running from Ryan, she was running from something much bigger. Adrian's cold, strategic tone made her wonder if he was ready for the war that was about to unfold. Could he really protect her? Was he prepared to go to the lengths it would take? "I can't just hide behind you. If I'm part of this now, I want to know everything." Adrian's eyes softened for a moment, almost as if he was about to speak in a way that was more personal, more vulnerable. But the moment passed, and he quickly masked his expression, returning to his usual composed self. "You need to understand something, Mira. This isn't just about you anymore. This is about taking down Ryan, about taking down a network that's been pulling strings for years. But I won't lie to you. This is going to get dangerous. There's no easy way out of this." Mira felt the weight of his words settle deep within her. She wasn't just fighting for her own freedom. She was fighting against a powerful, shadowy network. Her ex wasn't just a toxic presence in her life anymore. He was part of a much bigger, more dangerous world, one that she had no choice but to enter now. But it wasn't just Ryan she had to fear. There were people behind him, people who were just as ruthless. Mira's future no longer seemed like something she could control. Adrian had given her a path, but she wasn't sure she was ready to walk it. The stakes were higher than she had ever imagined, and the road ahead was uncertain. Yet somehow, she couldn't turn back. The tension was thick in the room as Adrian's voice broke through her thoughts. "There's no turning back now, Mira. You're in this as much as I am. And if we don't act soon, Ryan will come for you. He won't stop." The urgency in his voice snapped Mira back to reality. She had made a decision, whether she liked it or not. She had crossed a line, and now there was no going back. "Then let's do it." The decision was made. It was no longer about survival. It was about power, about taking back control from the forces that had dragged her into their twisted game. She didn't know how far Adrian was willing to go, but she knew one thing for sure. She was no longer just playing by his rules. This time, she would make her own. And as the door closed behind them, sealing their fates, Mira felt the first stirrings of a plan. A way to not only survive, but to finally take control. The plan was set into motion quickly, with Adrian taking the lead. Mira was no longer an observer in her own life. She was part of a dangerous game, one that had no room for hesitation. The world she had once known seemed so far away, now replaced by whispered conversations in dark corners, cryptic instructions, and a growing sense of urgency. Adrian's world was ruthless, efficient, and cold, but as much as she wanted to resist it, Mira couldn't help but be drawn in. It was all she had left. For the next few days, the tension between them was palpable. Mira spent her time researching everything she could about Ryan's connections, using the information Adrian had provided. She felt the walls closing in. Ryan's presence loomed over her, his messages growing more threatening by the day. But she had something he didn't. Adrian. She had no illusions about why he was doing this. He wasn't her knight in shining armor, despite how he appeared. He had his own reasons, his own agenda. But that didn't matter now. What mattered was that they were in this together. And for the first time, Mira began to realize that this might be the only way to reclaim her life. It was late one night, as the clock struck 2 a.m., that the tension finally broke. Mira had been reviewing the last piece of information Adrian had given her when her phone buzzed with an encrypted message. It was a location, an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Ryan's men were moving in. Adrian had warned her that they would come for her soon, but the time had come faster than she expected. This wasn't a warning anymore. It was the start of the fight. It's time. She quickly grabbed her jacket and made her way to the door. Adrian was waiting for her in the hallway, his expression unreadable. He was already dressed in black, ready for what was to come. No words were exchanged. There was no need for them. The moment had arrived. The drive to the warehouse was a blur. Adrian's black SUV cut through the dark streets of the city with an eerie calm. The silence between them was thick, but there was no fear in her now. She was focused, her mind sharpening like a blade. Ryan's people would be waiting, but so would Adrian. This wasn't just a rescue mission. It was a reckoning, and Mira was ready for it. As the warehouse loomed ahead, the headlights illuminating its desolate exterior, Adrian spoke for the first time since they had left. "Stay close to me. Don't make a sound unless I tell you to." The instructions were simple, but they carried the weight of everything they had planned. Mira nodded, her pulse quickening, but her mind was clear. She wasn't just the victim anymore. She was part of the plan, and this time, she would be the one to take action. The car rolled to a stop a few yards from the warehouse. Adrian turned to her, his eyes piercing in the dim light. "Stay here. I'll go in first. Wait for the signal." Mira didn't argue. She knew better than to question him now. Adrian had been planning this for weeks, and she trusted him. But trust was a fragile thing, and she couldn't help but feel the weight of it as she sat there, waiting for the signal. The wait felt like an eternity. Every minute stretched out, each second pulling at her nerves. Then, just as the silence began to suffocate her, a flash of movement. The door of the warehouse creaked open, and Adrian appeared, his form moving swiftly in the shadows. He gave her the signal, one quick flash of his hand, and without hesitation, Mira opened the car door and slipped into the night. They moved quickly, like shadows themselves. Adrian led the way, his movements precise and calculated. Mira stayed close, her heart pounding in her chest as they approached the entrance. The warehouse was silent, too quiet, but she knew better than to think that meant safety. Ryan's men were waiting inside. She could feel it in her bones. Adrian reached the door first, pausing for a moment, his hand resting on the handle. He glanced at Mira, his eyes narrowing. Without a word, he opened the door and slipped inside, signaling her to follow. The darkness swallowed them both as they entered the warehouse. The warehouse was massive, a cavernous space filled with crates and old machinery. Mira could hear the muffled sounds of voices from deeper within. She knew they were close, too close. Adrian moved like a predator, fluid and silent. Every step was calculated, every breath measured. Mira followed his lead, her own movements quiet, focused. This wasn't just a fight to survive anymore. This was a fight to take control. As they rounded a corner, a figure appeared. A man, standing in the shadows, watching them approach. Adrian's hand shot out, grabbing the man by the throat and lifting him off the ground. The figure gasped for air, his hands clawing at Adrian's grip. "Where is Ryan?" The man gasped again, but the pressure of Adrian's grip tightened. "He's upstairs. We were waiting for you. He knows you're here." Adrian threw him to the ground without a second thought, his face hardening. Mira felt a chill run down her spine. This was it. The final confrontation. The battle that would either destroy her or set her free. "Stay behind me." They moved quickly, ascending a narrow staircase that led to a dimly lit office. The door creaked open, and there, standing in the center of the room, was Ryan. His eyes locked onto Mira as soon as she stepped through the doorway, and the smug smile on his face faltered just slightly when he saw Adrian. "You really think you can stop me, Adrian? You've always been too soft. She's mine. You can't protect her forever." Mira's heart raced. This was the moment. Adrian stepped forward, his body tense with anger, but his voice was ice cold. "She's not yours, Ryan. She never was." The tension in the room thickened, and for a brief moment, Mira wondered how it would all end. Would Adrian be able to take Ryan down? Or was this all just a game they were playing, one where she was the ultimate prize? Ryan took a step forward, his posture aggressive, but before he could make another move, Adrienne's hand was already reaching for the gun holstered under his jacket. The gun was in Adrienne's hand before Mira could even blink. It wasn't pointed at Ryan, not yet, but the mere sight of it made the air in the room thick with tension. Ryan's smug smile had faltered completely now. There was a moment of silence, deafening, suffocating, before Ryan broke it, his voice low and venomous. "You think you can just waltz in here and take me down? You don't even know what you're up against, Adrienne. You never did." Adrienne didn't flinch. His grip on the gun was steady, his stance unwavering. Mira stood behind him, watching the two men like they were actors on a stage she had no part in. The words exchanged between them felt like echoes of a battle that had been brewing for far longer than she had been a part of it. It was only now, in this cold, dimly lit room, that the full weight of it all pressed down on her. Ryan's words cut deeper than she expected, though. It wasn't just a taunt. It was a warning. He knew something she didn't. Mira's thoughts raced as she tried to piece together the tangled web of lies and betrayal that had brought her here. Why was Ryan so confident? What did he know that Adrienne hadn't told her? "You're a fool if you think you're in control, Adrienne. You've always been a pawn, just like her, just like her father. None of you know what you're truly involved in. But I'll be happy to show you." Mira's heart skipped a beat. The mention of her father hit her like a slap in the face. Adrienne had said her father was involved in this criminal network, but she hadn't fully understood what that meant until now. Ryan's words weren't just threats. They were a revelation. And in that moment, Mira realized just how deep her family's connection to this mess really went. Adrienne's eyes narrowed, the slightest twitch of anger passing over his features. He knew that Ryan wasn't just talking about power. He was talking about something personal, something hidden. And that was enough to make Adrienne pause, just for a moment. "You're running out of time, Ryan. Tell me what you know, or you'll regret it." Ryan's grin never wavered, but his eyes flickered, betraying a hint of uncertainty. Adrienne wasn't the only one who had secrets. "Regret? You think you've won already? You've been playing into my hands all along. You never even saw it coming, did you?" In a split second, the entire room seemed to shift. Mira's stomach dropped, a cold rush of dread sweeping over her. Adrienne stiffened, his jaw tightening as the full weight of Ryan's words settled in. Ryan was playing a game, one he had been playing for much longer than either of them had realized. It wasn't just about control. It wasn't even about money or power. No, this was personal. And as Ryan's smirk deepened, Mira's mind raced, trying to piece together the twisted puzzle of their lives, their families, and their pasts. But it wasn't just Ryan's taunting that chilled her to the bone. It was the sudden realization that she had been living in the middle of a game she didn't even know was being played. She was a piece in a much larger scheme. "What game are you playing, Ryan?" "The game you've been in since the day your father disappeared. The game you've been running from. You think Adrienne can protect you? He can't. Not from the real enemy. Not from me." The truth hit Mira like a freight train. Adrienne wasn't just protecting her from Ryan. He was protecting her from something far more dangerous, something she had no idea existed. Her father's disappearance, the secrets surrounding it, they were all part of a much larger conspiracy, one that involved powerful players from both sides of the law. And Ryan? He wasn't just a threat to her. He was the key to unraveling everything she thought she knew about her family, her past, and the man who had promised to keep her safe. But just as the realization began to settle in, Adrienne made his move. He stepped forward, closing the distance between himself and Ryan with deliberate precision. "You're done, Ryan. Your game ends now." Ryan's eyes flashed with anger, but he didn't make a move. Instead, he just stood there, a strange calm overtaking him as he locked eyes with Adrienne. For a moment, it felt like time had stopped, like they were waiting for something to break. And then, in the blink of an eye, the room exploded with noise, gunfire, shouting, chaos. The gunfire rang out in the warehouse, sharp and deafening, echoing through the concrete walls like a warning. Mira's heart pounded in her chest as chaos erupted around her. The world seemed to move in slow motion. Adrienne was still standing, poised and calculating, his gun aimed at Ryan. But Ryan wasn't backing down. The tension between them was palpable, thick with a sense of finality. This was the moment that would either end it all or tear everything apart. Mira ducked instinctively, her instincts kicking in as the sound of gunshots filled the room. She couldn't see where the bullets were coming from, but she could feel the danger pressing in on all sides. Her mind raced. Everything had escalated so quickly. The game Ryan was playing was much bigger than she had ever imagined. And now, she was caught in the middle of a deadly standoff. But her voice was drowned out by another round of gunfire. She had no choice but to keep her head down, praying that Adrienne had everything under control. Her pulse hammered in her ears as she slowly edged toward the wall, her body pressed flat against the cold concrete. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She had come here looking for answers, for a way out of the nightmare that was her life. But now, the nightmare had exploded into full-scale violence. Adrienne moved with military precision, his every move calculated and measured. Mira watched, heart in her throat, as he flanked Ryan, using the shadows to his advantage. The tension in the room was electric, the air thick with the promise of destruction. But something had shifted. Mira could sense it. Ryan was no longer just an adversary. He was part of something much bigger, and Adrienne knew it. His eyes never left Ryan's, a silent war waging between them as the minutes ticked by. "You think you can stop me, Adrienne? You're just as trapped as she is. You've been playing my game from the start. You just didn't realize it until now." Ryan's words struck a chord, sending a shiver down Mira's spine. She didn't know what he meant, but the implication was clear. Whatever was happening now, whatever Adrienne had gotten himself into, it was personal. And if Ryan was right, Adrienne wasn't the hero he appeared to be. Maybe he was just as tangled in this mess as she was. "I'm not playing your game anymore, Ryan. It's over." But even as Adrienne spoke, Mira could see it, the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. It wasn't much, just a brief moment of vulnerability, but it was enough. She could see the cracks in his otherwise impenetrable facade. There was something he wasn't telling her, something that went beyond Ryan and his criminal empire. And for the first time, Mira wasn't sure if Adrienne was the protector he seemed to be, or if he had his own agenda. Was she just another pawn in a game she didn't understand? The moment stretched, each second feeling like an eternity. Ryan, still grinning, didn't flinch. He wasn't scared of Adrienne, not even with the gun trained on him. The tension between the two men was suffocating, their silent standoff almost a battle of wills. But the air was thick with something more than animosity. There was a deeper connection here, a history between them that neither man had fully revealed. "You really think she's safe with you? You think you can protect her? You've been protecting the wrong people all along, Adrienne. Your whole life has been a lie." The words hit harder than Mira expected, though she didn't understand why. What did Ryan mean by that? What was Adrienne hiding from her? Ryan's words were poison, spreading doubt through her mind. He had a way of twisting the truth, using Mira's fear to break her down. But Adrienne didn't flinch. His gaze was cold, unwavering. He wasn't about to let Ryan get the better of him. And despite the chaos surrounding them, Adrienne had control. Mira could feel it. His presence, his strength. It was palpable. "This ends tonight. You've crossed the line, Ryan, and you're going to pay for everything you've done." And then, without warning, the shot rang out. The sound of gunfire was sharp and final, echoing through the warehouse like a hammer striking an anvil. Ryan's grin faltered for the briefest moment as he stumbled back, his hand gripping his side where the bullet had struck. Mira's breath caught in her throat. Her eyes darted between Adrienne and Ryan, her heart pounding. Was it over? Had Adrienne really just shot him? "You think this is over? You have no idea what you've just done." Ryan's words were taunting, but his body betrayed him. He was on his knees now, blood staining his shirt, but there was something in his eyes that spoke of a deeper, more dangerous game. Adrienne had taken the first step, but Ryan was far from finished. He had a backup plan, something more dangerous than Mira could imagine. As Ryan collapsed to the floor, his eyes locked onto Mira's. It was a look that sent chills down her spine. A look that promised revenge. He wasn't done with her yet, not by a long shot. Mira felt a cold, creeping sense of dread fill her chest. This was far from over, and the game they had just begun to play was more deadly than she had ever imagined. Ryan lay on the cold concrete floor, his body motionless, but Mira couldn't shake the feeling that his defeat wasn't final. His last words hung in the air like a promise, a threat waiting to be fulfilled. She looked from him to Adrian, whose face was as unreadable as ever. The gun Adrian had used to silence Ryan was now lowered, resting by his side. But Mira could see the tension in his shoulders, the slight tremor in his hand. Even Adrian, the man who had always seemed to have control, couldn't shake the weight of this moment. Mira was frozen in place, caught between what had just happened and the realization that everything she thought she knew about Adrian, about Ryan, was wrong. Her world had just shifted once again, and she wasn't sure she knew who was the hero anymore, or if anyone even had a claim to that title. Is he really dead? For now, yes. But Ryan's not the one you should be worried about. The words felt like a punch to the stomach. Mira swallowed hard, trying to understand what he meant. Hadn't they just taken down the man who had been chasing her for months? Hadn't they just ended this nightmare? But Adrian's tone, the weight in his voice, it suggested that the real battle was only just beginning. What do you mean? He's not the one I should be worried about. Then who is? Adrian's eyes flickered with something. Was it regret? Fear? Mira couldn't tell. He moved toward her slowly, deliberately, closing the distance between them as the tension in the room thickened. There's more to this, Mira. Ryan was just a piece of the puzzle. He's been working for someone much bigger, more powerful than you realize. We've been following the wrong trail, and now we've made ourselves a target. Mira's breath caught in her throat. Adrian was right. Ryan hadn't been the endgame. He had been a pawn, an obstacle on the way to something far more dangerous. But who were they really up against? Who are they? Who's behind all of this? Adrian didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked past her, his footsteps heavy, deliberate. He didn't need to say anything more for Mira to understand. The power behind Ryan's operation wasn't just criminal. It was entrenched in every level of society, every corner of the business world. People with money, influence, and connections that stretched further than she could possibly imagine. It wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. It was a fight for control, for power. And she was caught in the middle of it all. As the seconds passed, the room felt smaller, the walls closing in on her. She realized she wasn't just trapped in the conflict between Adrian and Ryan. She was now a part of something bigger, a war between powerful forces, and the stakes were higher than she could ever have imagined. Adrian had warned her that there were forces at play that she couldn't comprehend. But this was different. This was personal, and Adrian was involved in it all. It was becoming harder to tell if he was the protector he seemed to be, or if he was just as dangerous as the people they were fighting against. So what now? Are we just supposed to wait for them to come after us? No. We move forward. We find out who's really behind Ryan. We expose them, and we take them down, before they can finish what they've started. Mira stared at him, feeling a surge of emotion welling up inside her. Fear, anger, frustration. She had trusted him, believed in his protection. But now, she didn't know who to trust. He was right, of course. Ryan wasn't the real threat. There were bigger players in this game. But was Adrian one of them? Was he part of the very system that had been trying to destroy her life? I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can keep following you. Adrian's gaze softened. But there was no pity in it. There was only understanding. He knew she was scared. He knew she was questioning everything. But this wasn't the time for hesitation. If Mira wanted to survive, if she wanted to have any chance at freedom, she had to make a choice. And she had to make it now. I never wanted you to get involved in this, Mira. But we're already in too deep. If we don't stop this now, it'll destroy everything. Your life, my life, everyone's. There it was again. That soft, almost vulnerable tone in Adrian's voice. He was trying to protect her, again. But Mira wasn't sure she could trust him anymore. Was he the man who had been protecting her? Or was he the very person who had led her into this deadly game? She turned away from him, her thoughts a whirlwind of confusion and doubt. The decision weighed on her like a ton of bricks. Could she trust Adrian? Could she trust anyone? Or was she truly on her own now, with no one left to turn to but herself. I don't know anymore. The words hung in the air between them, filled with uncertainty and the weight of what they both knew to be true. Mira had reached a crossroads. She could walk away from this, leave Adrian and his world behind. But the truth was, she couldn't. Ryan was only the beginning, and if she walked away now, she would never be free. There was no escaping the past she had been tied to. Not anymore. As Mira turned back toward Adrian, her resolve hardened. She didn't have all the answers, but she couldn't afford to wait for someone else to save her, not when the enemy was already closing in on her. If this was the fight she had to face, then she would face it, on her terms. All right, let's finish this. The night was thick with tension as Mira and Adrian made their way through the narrow alleyways, the city's towering skyline looming in the distance. The darkness wrapped around them, leaving no room for hesitation. Adrian had given her a plan, a path that could finally end everything she had been running from. But Mira couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking right into the heart of something even more dangerous than she could imagine. The game had changed, and now, they were playing for their lives. They arrived at a discreet, seemingly ordinary building on the edge of the city, nothing like the upscale properties Adrian usually occupied. This place was different, a hidden compound that Adrian had been tracking for months, the key to everything. But Mira's heart raced with unease. This wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. This was about destroying an empire. And the deeper they got into this world, the more she realized just how tangled they both were in its dark web. Adrian turned to her, his expression firm and resolute. They had come this far. There was no turning back now. But Mira couldn't help but feel a chill settle over her. It wasn't the cold night air that made her shiver. It was the weight of what they were about to do. Are you sure about this? No. But we don't have a choice anymore. The words were simple, but they carried a gravity that pressed down on her chest. There was no uncertainty in Adrian's voice, no hesitation. He was ready for whatever came next. But Mira wasn't sure she was. She had been swept up in his world, in his plan, and now, she was playing a role she hadn't fully understood. She trusted him, but there was a part of her that still didn't know where his true loyalties lay. They entered the building quietly, moving through the dimly lit corridors with practiced ease. Adrian led the way, his every movement precise, calculated. Mira followed close behind, her mind racing with 1,000 questions. Every step felt like it was leading them further down a path they couldn't escape. She had no idea what Adrian had planned, but she couldn't back down now. Not when she was this close to the truth. They reached a heavy metal door at the end of the hall. Adrian stopped, glancing back at Mira with a brief, almost imperceptible look of reassurance. But his eyes betrayed something else, a flicker of uncertainty, a crack in his otherwise composed facade. For the first time Mira saw it. Adrian was nervous, and that terrified her. What is behind that door? The heart of it all. Adrian opened the door, revealing a large, sterile room filled with high-tech equipment, computers, monitors, surveillance gear. And there, sitting at the center of it all, was the man who had orchestrated everything. Victor Lansdale. The man who had been pulling the strings, the shadowy figure behind Ryan, behind the entire criminal network that had controlled her life for so long. Victor was not what Mira had expected. He wasn't some faceless criminal. He was composed, calm, and calculating, dressed in a sharp suit that screamed power. But there was something else in his eyes, a cold, calculating intelligence that made Mira's skin crawl. Victor's gaze flicked between Mira and Adrienne, an amused smile creeping across his lips as if he had been expecting them. He leaned back in his chair, completely unbothered by their presence. It was as if he knew the battle was already won. Well, well, if it isn't Adrian Cole and his little companion. I must say, I'm impressed. You've made it further than I anticipated. But this is where it ends, I'm afraid. The words hit Mira like a punch to the gut. She had been expecting this moment for so long, but now that it was here, the reality was worse than she had imagined. Victor Lansdale was more than just a criminal. He was the mastermind behind everything. Behind Ryan, behind the forces that had controlled her family, her life, her every move. Adrian didn't flinch. His face remained impassive, but the tension in his body was palpable. He wasn't here to negotiate. This wasn't just a conversation, it was the final showdown, and Adrian was ready to end it. This ends tonight, Victor. Your empire is finished. Victor's smile widened, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of a man who knew something they didn't, a man who had already won the game. He stood slowly, walking toward them with an eerie confidence. You think you can take me down, Adrian? You've been playing in my game this whole time. Every move you've made, I've seen it coming. You're not as clever as you think. What do you mean? What game? Who are you really? Who am I? I'm the man who's been controlling everything you thought you knew. You see, Mira, you were never just a victim. You were always the key to it all. Your father's involvement, your family's debts. It was all part of the plan. And Adrian? He was never going to protect you. He was going to use you, just like I was. The words struck like a bombshell. Mira's world tilted once again. She had trusted Adrian. She had believed that he was the one to save her. But now, standing in front of Victor, it was clear that everything she had been told was a lie. Adrian wasn't just trying to protect her. He had been using her too. He had been a part of Victor's game all along. For a moment, everything went still. Mira stood frozen, the weight of Victor's words sinking in. Adrian had been part of the plan all along. He wasn't her savior. He was a player, just like Ryan. But there was more to the story, more than she could see in this moment. Adrian had never played the game the way Victor thought. She could see that in his eyes now. Adrian wasn't going to let Victor win. Not this time. Victor turned toward the monitors, his hand brushing over the screens, a look of satisfaction in his eyes. You're too late, Adrian. The pieces are already in motion. You can't stop what's coming. I'll stop it. Mira couldn't help but wonder if Adrian truly believed his words, or if he was just trying to convince himself. She wasn't sure anymore. The lines had blurred so much that she wasn't sure who the enemy really was. But she knew one thing for certain. This fight was far from over, and the man who had promised to protect her was just as lost in this web as she was. As Victor's smug grin grew wider, Mira realized that the real battle had only just begun. And now, it was up to her to decide if she could trust the man standing beside her, or if she was truly alone in this war. The silence in the room was suffocating. Mira stood between two men, one who had promised to protect her, and the other who had orchestrated her entanglement in this mess from the very beginning. Adrian's gaze was intense, focused, but there was a hint of vulnerability in his eyes that Mira hadn't seen before. The cold, calculated persona he had worn for so long seemed to crack, just slightly, and in that crack, Mira saw a glimpse of the man beneath, the man who had been trapped in the same game as her. Victor, on the other hand, was the picture of arrogance. He stood there, grinning like a man who had already won, unaware that the final act of this twisted play was still unfolding. The truth was finally clear. Mira wasn't just a pawn. She had never been. She was the key to everything. The leverage that both men had fought for, each in their own way. But now, with Victor standing in front of her and Adrian by her side, Mira felt something inside her shift. It was no longer about running, no longer about surviving. It was about taking control of her own fate. She couldn't let herself be caught in the web of lies and manipulation anymore. The choice was hers. No more games, no more lies. Adrian looked at her, his expression unreadable, but there was a flicker of recognition in his eyes. The truth was out in the open now. There were no more masks to wear, no more pretenses. They were all in this together, for better or worse. Victor's smirk deepened as he stepped toward them, unbothered by the tension in the room. He didn't seem to realize just how close he was to losing everything. But Mira could see it now. Victor had underestimated her, underestimated both of them. You think you can stop me? You don't have the power. None of you do. You're wrong, Victor. The game is over, and you're the one who's about to lose. The room was still, but Mira could feel the shift in the air. This wasn't just about Adrian and Victor anymore. This was about her taking back control. Her hands clenched into fists as she stepped forward, her eyes fixed on Victor, the man who had tried to pull the strings behind her life for so long. It wasn't about Adrian's promises anymore. It wasn't about the past. It was about the future. Her future. You think you have all the power, Victor, but I'm done being afraid. Victor's face twitched, the smugness fading for just a second. He had never seen Mira like this. Unshaken, defiant. She wasn't the same woman he had manipulated and controlled for so long. She had found her strength. You'll regret this. Both of you. And with that, the battle was won. Not by Adrian, not by Victor, but by Mira. In that moment, with her voice steady and her resolve clear, she took control of her own destiny. The power had shifted. The final cards had been played. As Victor's minions moved to intervene, Adrian stepped forward, his presence a wall between them and the man who had once been their adversary. But it wasn't Adrian who defeated Victor. It was Mira's decision to finally step out from behind the shadows and claim her place in the light. She had made the choice, not him. Victor's empire crumbled, and with it, the hold he had on Mira's life. His criminal network, once a web of lies and deceit, unraveled as the evidence of his crimes came to light. Mira had unknowingly been the key to his downfall all along, but it was her strength and determination that sealed his fate. I'm not your pawn. I never was. Adrian didn't respond immediately, but his eyes softened as he watched her, something in his gaze telling her he understood. For the first time, Mira realized that it wasn't just about survival. It wasn't about escaping her past, her ex, or even Victor's shadow. It was about her reclaiming who she was and who she could be. The weight of the past lifted, just a little, as the truth about her family and her involvement in the larger conspiracy finally came to light. But Mira had no desire to dwell on it. She had faced her demons, uncovered the secrets that had bound her, and now, she was free. Adrian stepped closer, his voice quiet but steady as he spoke. You did it. You're free now. Mira looked at him, not with the wariness of someone caught in a contract, but with a newfound clarity. She didn't need his protection anymore. She had fought for her life, and now she would live it on her own terms. The ties between them had been severed, but there was no bitterness, only the recognition that they had each played their part in a story that had come to its end. The world outside was still waiting, but Mira wasn't afraid. She had stepped into her own power, and for the first time, she felt like she could breathe. There were no more shadows, no more fear, only the freedom she had fought for, and the future she would shape on her own terms. I'm free,